Welcome to the Answers 42 podcast. I am your host, Dan Wettstein. As always, we are here to give you your weekly run through across the sports landscape. And we got a bit of a doozy for y'all. If y'all have not been acquainted with me, we are going to start this off raw and real about something I am truly passionate about. Then we'll end it up with some overlooked, less passionate things, but we'll definitely keep the energy throughout. So let's go ahead and let's jump into it. Everything from Pride Night in Major League Baseball to the top five overlooked teams in the NFL. Let's get it. So first off, first topic here is something that has become very controversial just over the last couple of years. Everybody seems to think that this is some new advent of a woke culture that is trying to force their ideas and quote unquote religion on you, family value conservative types. And I am here to tell you, you are a full of crap bigot. Any person that says any of the things that I just said, or even thinks them, you don't even have to say them out loud. If you think that Pride Night or Pride Month is a bunch of wackos trying to shove their lifestyle and religion down your throat, you are a bigot. You are a terrible, terrible, terrible human being. This month, the nights that MLB has, these pride nights, are not an indoctrination. They are not shoving anything in your face. There is not a single one of you bigots that has had a gun held to your head and forced to either go to or support any of these nights or any of these causes. Absolutely nobody is forcing you to be up in arms. This is simply and plainly a culture war created by the right. Plain and simple. The original Pride Night, for all of you folks that are too stupid to Google something, the original Pride Night was in 2001 by the Chicago Cubs. They called it the Gay Days. They now call it Out at Wrigley Field. There is some type of misconception that has been beaten home into so many people on a certain demographic that they believe that somehow this minor minority is somehow taking over the world because they got 1 month to celebrate and be proud of who they are, and they get one night per MLB team except for one, and we will get to you, Texas Rangers. But outside of there, they get one night where they can come out and just be themselves. And for you weirdos that are always talking about the absolute worst of us of these people, the LGBTQ community, which every community has bad people. Every single community has terrible people. To try and judge an entire group by the worst of them is the worst thing that any human can do on trying to be anything other than an actual terrible human. I I care so much about this, and I'm bringing this up because I have multiple family and friends that are within this community. I have a friend that did not come out until just about a year and a half, somewhere between a year and a half and 2 years ago. I don't remember the exact date that he came out, but he is one of the best people I have ever met, one of my closest friends I have ever had. His name is Anthony Newell. He just recently came out. Um, I believe he is out as bi. I don't think he's completely just completely homosexual, but either way, it doesn't matter. He's part of it. And the reason he kept all of that in for so long, when I met him, he was married to a woman, had essentially adopted her 5 kids, got divorced from her, got with another woman, had 2 kids with her, all under the guise that that was the person he was supposed to be, because that's what society would accept. That they would never accept a gay black man as just being him. that they would ostracize him and try and tear him down in every way possible, because that is the generation that me and him grew up in. This is the fact that people can be proud to be gay, bi, whatever it is that they want to be, whatever their sexuality is, more power to them. For me, and I'm sure everybody else here, I am a complete ally. If nothing against any of y'all are doing, this month is just simply for them to be happy, to know that they are accepted, because for so long they have not been. And for anybody to sit here and try and push any other agenda than the fact that this is just a month and a day that the rest of us are just saying, hey, it's okay, we accept you. But that has been turned on its face because of the political spectrum that we are in. I'm not going to go too far down that rabbit hole, but that's simply what it is. There is nobody at Target that is selling your kids tuck bikinis. That's not a thing. There is nobody at Bed Bath and Beyond pushing an indoctrination of your children. There is nobody at Bud Light that is trying to get your kid to become trans just simply because they put a trans guy or trans woman on a can. This is one of the most asinine things I've seen, but we have enough of a demographic in the US to make places or make teams like the Los Angeles Dodgers rescind invitations to LGBTQ allies and groups simply because of the backlash, they call it, from a select group of fans. Again, I'm not going to sit here and single out anybody any more than I have to. This isn't really just my platform, so I'm trying to keep it as PC as possible. This is the best I can do. It's just infuriating for people to sit there, because when you say that the entire community is just indoctrinating children and they're just pedophile, you're talking about my friend, you're talking about my family members, and none of them are that. I have yet to meet a single homosexual person of any persuasion, of any breadth on that rainbow, any breadth on that spectrum, that have been anything other than the greatest protector of children. I'm certain that you can find them out there, just like in, again, any other group. You can find terrible people in every single group of people if you look hard enough. And what's being done to this group of people is just so sad to watch, because there are so many people that are in power that are punching down constantly the unimaginable litany of legislation that has come through in so many states, and even some that have been trying to be pushed federally, just to try and quiet this small minority of people that just want to live. So if you are of any other ilk than just saying, oh, it's Pride Month, good for you guys, I hope you have a great one. If you have any other take whatsoever, you are a bigot and a terrible person. If you have any other reaction to this month, to any of these celebrations, that is simply what it is. And the fact that we still have a team in the Texas Rangers that refuse to have a Pride Night because they say that, oh, we're doing more meaningful things. They sponsor a gay softball league and this and that and the other, and they do a couple other small donations, and they have a couple of little charity events here and there. But Pride Month is not about charity. People in the LGBTQ community, they don't want anything from you other than acceptance. That's it. That is all I have ever found that is ever wanted from any person I have ever met in that community. They want nothing more than to be accepted, because the vast majority of them have been rejected by society, by their own their own parents in a lot of situations. I'm not going to say every. There's a lot of great parents out there that do great things, but in a lot of situations, especially in any household that is headed by some boomers, they have been completely ostracized from their family. So if you can't do it, the simple act of kindness of saying that you are accepted as you are, then please sit down and STFU, period. So that's what I have to say on that. If you got a problem with me, hit me right at the Twitter, right there. Go ahead and join the cesspool. I don't mind. I'll smack you around a little bit. But let's go ahead and move on to the next one. Yeah, if y'all have something to say, come at me. I'm with it. But let's go ahead and talk about some more baseball, but a little less controversial. Let's talk about the fact that the MLB trade deadline's creeping closer and closer as we speak, and there is a lot of players that could be on the move. Some big names, some not so big names. But there are some things to be had. So let's see who is out there and who is most likely to be traded. This is not a in-depth look at every player that could be traded and all of that, but these are the most likely candidates I believe will be traded at the deadline and why. First up, we have Lucas Giolito from the Chicago White Sox, left-handed pitcher. I mean, he looked like to be the next Chris Sale or Randy Johnson, somebody like that was just going to be an absolutely dominant left-hander coming out of school into the major leagues. Kind of had some rough starts to his career, but then kind of found it around 2021 and became that dominant world beater type of pitcher that helped the Sox shock a couple of people in those seasons and have better seasons than people expected, but has kind of regressed over the 22 and into the 23 seasons, but has kind of turned the corner here lately. Overall this season, he's pitched 86 innings, 5-4 record, 3.54 ERA, and a 24.5% K rate, but still has a little bit high of a walk rate of 7.7%, but still much better than what he's done over the last year plus. So I think this really kind of helped raise his value in the trade market. Chicago White Sox really don't look like they're going to be making too much noise this season. So I think selling as high as you can on a Lucas Giolito, who also has some injury issues in his past, get the best that you can for him, whatever the best package of picks are, or not picks, but of prospects are. There you go. There's the other P word I was looking for. But the best prospects that they can get for him, sell high, get what they can. It just seems like it makes sense for a team that might be on the cusp of a rebuild after Jose Abreu left in the offseason, and a few other things that have happened. But they got a little bit of a youth movement, so I see them wanting probably one or two guys that are pretty close to the major league level, but I think they'll get a pretty good package. And he will be on a contenders rotation before the end of the season. Next up, we have Paul Goldschmidt, first baseman for the St. Louis Cardinals. Even though he is in his mid-30s, he's kind of reaching the swan song of his career. I think the advent of the DH in DNL will kind of help extend his career as we go along. But even as it is now, he is still a top-notch first baseman, both offensively and defensively. Currently, right now, he sits at 12 home runs, 33 RBIs, 7 stolen bases. Again, yes, a first baseman that steals bases. He's not the absolute fastest guy, but he's a very, very good base runner, and he has been his entire career. And he's also throwing out a 287 average, 381 on-base percentage, and 493 slugging. All very good numbers that can help a plethora of contenders. Like we can talk about the Houston Astros, that Jose Abreu is really not doing much, even though he came down. I can see them going out and getting him to plug in even another ridiculous bat into that stupid lineup that Houston has created over the last few years. So, and again, St. Louis kind of in that doldrum. They never really are a team that rebuilds, but they do retooling on the fly very well. I think the replacement of Contreras to replace Yachty, and you got Paul out there that replaced their past first baseman, Matt Carpenter. They always do a really good job of using that line of prospects they always seem to be having coming through their system. They always have one of the better systems, no matter how many players they trade out of it. They always seem to find more and develop them very, very well, especially starting pitching, which is always a hot ticket item on the market out there. So they're always seemingly able to make a few moves, retool, and then get right back into contention, especially in a very weak Central Division. One that's perennially always seems to be one of the weaker divisions, which is the NL Central. It always seems to be the tightest one. So they can really make a bounce back next year if they just make a couple of deft moves, and trading Paul Goldschmidt at the deadline and getting a good haul of prospects back in return would be a good step in that direction. Next up, we're going to stay in St. Louis, this time on the mound with Jack Flaherty, a guy that many in St. Louis thought was going to be the next Adam Wainwright, but from the left side with even more power. But unfortunately, outside of one season, he really hasn't panned out. But again, just like a Lucas Giolito, he's left-handed, inherently valuable, and even more rare, as if anybody's been paying attention to left-handed science, they're no longer being born. So unless somebody comes out ambidextrous, or just they're weird, like say like a Larry Walker or somebody like that throws with one hand, or one of my best friend Mike, he was so weird. He did some things right-handed, some things left-handed. We never understood it, but it's how his brain worked. So there's that possibility, but pure left-handed people are no longer being born. We have evolved out of the need of left-handed people. Weird enough, but it's true. Google me if you don't believe me. But again, left-handed, inherent value. Get off my tangent. Back to here. His numbers on the surface don't look great. 3-5, 4.64 ERA, 159 WHIP, 22.8% K rate, which isn't terrible, but still a little low. And then that 13.1% walk rate. That is scary to see. But I think if you take him, put him on a contender, and instead of him being at the front of a rotation on an okay team, and put him at the back of the rotation on a really good team, that you can mask some of his weaknesses, get him some better matchups against lesser competition with the other teams' back end starters. I think you have something there for a contender ending the season, and him being able to contribute. Sorry, okay, they're good. Sorry, just heard a crash, so wasn't sure if somebody just died out there. Just wanted to make sure, but no, sounds like they're okay. But last year, most likely to be traded, I think, is James Paxton of the Boston Red Sox. He has pitched just 32 innings, but has a 2-1 win-loss record, 3.09 ERA, 116 WHIP, and a 7.5% walk rate. So after beginning the season on the injured list, which it's kind of the risk you take with James Paxton. Typically, when he's healthy, he's really, really good. But he tends to get hurt a lot too. A lot like Chris Sale, very similar, and again, the left-hander. So him going out there and getting a good package would be a great deal for Boston, because they need beyond a retool. This isn't St. Louis where they can just make a couple of changes here and there. Their entire rotation is in shambles. Their bullpen is suspect. Their offense is up and down, inconsistent. So there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done in Boston. I know they had a lot of hopes with this roster as it was built. I really wanted to see Trevor Story go there and get some wins. The poor guy's done nothing but be with a terrible franchise, and unfortunately went to a team that's supposed to be a great franchise that's starting to look a lot like the team that he left. So hopefully, for Trevor's sake, after signing that deal, he's not stuck in another bad situation, being one of the better players on a terrible team. So hopefully they flip those around. Those are my most likely candidates to be traded before the MLB draft or MLB trade deadline. Let me know what you think. Who do you believe that maybe I didn't talk about, or maybe you want to add on to something or someone I did talk about? Let me know down in the comments, at the Twitters, at the Instas, at the Facebooks, wherever you feel comfortable. Make sure you go down in the comments. I appreciate that like, all y'all stopping by. Um, but let's go ahead and switch gears here, move from Major League Baseball over to what's happening tonight, and that is the NBA draft. A lot of people in Denver probably weren't looking towards this draft as being anything significant, but that has changed thanks to some deft moves by Calvin Booth, who has turned a 2029 first rounder, a 2024 first rounder, and a second rounder this year and a second rounder next year into a first and two twos this season. They still have a first round pick next year. They gave up the lesser of their two picks that they believe is going to be much lower. They gave up their 2024 first round pick as opposed to the one that they got from Oklahoma, which they believe is going to be much higher than theirs. So they gave up theirs, which they assume is going to be somewhere in the 26 to 30 range because they're going to get to the playoffs, probably do another deep run like they did this season as long as they stay healthy. So they now have three picks all bunched together, 29, 32, and 37. That is plenty of ammunition to make some serious noise tonight. But are they the best ones to be taking a look at? I believe so, because, well, that's what we do here. But I'm not going to go too far into that because I'm going to save that for what I do with Michael here after this show. So make sure after the show, you stick around on 5280 Sports because we are going to be doing some live NBA draft coverage. Me, Mike, to begin with, I think there's a couple of other of our teammates that might be jumping in at certain points. But to start off, I know for a fact it'll be me and Mike. Anybody else is a bonus. We appreciate y'all. Please jump in with us. But I will be there shortly after here. I'm going to have to do a few things, so I won't directly over there. But I will be jumping on with Mike pretty soon after the draft starts. So, who Victor Wembanyama. We've talked about this before. Number one overall pick. He's going. That's where he's going. Can he live up to the hype? We've already discussed this. I don't think he can, but I think he can still be a great player because living up to this type of hype is almost impossible. He is supposed to be the second coming of Wilt Chamberlain, essentially. How you live up to that, it's almost impossible. But if anybody can do it, it will be Victor Wembanyama. But where's the intrigue? What's the next thing? And that is the stories coming out about the Charlotte Hornets and what they might do between Brandon Miller and Scoot Henderson. I think the most interesting thing is that Brandon Miller is either one of the dumbest prospects to ever come out or one of the most brilliant. And the reason I say that is because the last several days has been talk about nothing but Brandon Miller and what he did in his smack talk when he visited the Charlotte Hornets and was in front of the GOAT, Michael Jordan, talking about he called him old. He made fun of Michael for airballing a free throw, even though Michael's pushing over 60. Like, this cat went absolutely ham on one of, if not the greatest players ever. And then turned around after talking crap about Michael Jordan, about him being old and all this, and said his GOAT, I do want to be clear, he said his GOAT, not the GOAT, but his GOAT was Paul George. That's what gives me pause. And that is the intrigue that I wanted to talk about. Who calls PG-13, the guy that gave himself a nickname before ever winning a playoff game and has done absolutely nothing really in this league? He's had a couple of nice games. He does some things nice here and there, but I've never seen Paul George as a true superstar. He has always been the Pippen to somebody else's Jordan. He has never been the guy and his team win. When he's the guy, his team typically chokes. He is one of the worst players I have seen under pressure ever. I mean, it is countless the amount of times you can pull up on YouTube of Paul George just stinking the place up in one of the biggest games of his career. So sitting here and trying to make him out to be something more was insane to me when you sat there and talked nothing but crap about the actual GOAT, the actual greatest player of all time, and then you sit and in the same interview talk about Paul George. To me, that is a red flag. That means that you idolized somebody that was more worried about being the vainest player he could be than the best player he could be. He's not talking about idolizing an all-time great. Like I'd even take a LeBron James. I would take Shaq, literally Kobe, any of these guys, any of them. And there's even some other guys, some lesser guys that I would take. But to sit there and be like, my GOAT is Paul George, and in the same breath try to talk smack about Michael Jordan, the 60-year-old Michael Jordan, to be clear. Yes, he was talking smack about the 60-year-old Michael Jordan. But that doesn't matter. You really sat there and tried to badmouth a GOAT and then say that your GOAT is just a me guy. That should be a red flag. To me, that shows that he might be the biggest bust coming out of this draft if that is his mentality. That he could end up, and maybe not, and maybe bust is a bit of a strong word, but the Kyrie, we'll say he could be the Kyrie of this draft. He could just be that guy that's otherworldly talented, but insufferably ignorant to the point where he just wears out his welcome wherever he goes. I could be wrong. I don't know the kid personally. I'm not saying he's a bad kid. I don't, like I said, I don't know him personally. I'm not saying he's a bad person, but that right there is a red flag to me. So if I'm sitting at number 2, I'm telling you right now, I'm taking Scoot. That one conversation right there would make me take Scoot over Miller. I don't care if you believe Miller's the better player, the better athlete. Scoot Henderson has the better mentality, and that is the biggest key to any draft prospect. What is your mental state? What is your thought process when the chips are down? Are you going to trust your teammates? Are you going to play a team game? Or are you that selfish guy that has to have the rock in their hands, even if they're cold, just because they want to say they took the last shot, whether they made it or not? I think Nikola Jokic has proven that you don't have to be an egocentric, self-centered POS to be great in this league. You don't have to do all of the circus acts to get recognition. Just be good at what you do, be humble on the mic, and live your life. Don't do the crazy stuff. Don't make the Insta stories with the guns and all that. And that's what worries me about this kid Miller is that it's just like with Jaw. Like I love Jaw, and I completely overlooked his off the court things because of how much I loved him, but I never talked about the off the court things, which I should have because they were significant. He had they weren't nearly as bad as what he has now. But I think the fact that everybody ignoring those little red flags at the beginning are what led to the major red flags we've had over the last couple of months with Jaw. So I am hoping somebody's in Miller's ear that can keep him calm, and not just let him run roughshod the way that Jaw has, by surrounding himself with nothing but sycophants. If he's got a strong team, I think Miller can be a great player in this league. But he's one of those guys that is just like, man, if that's the attitude you have now, before you've done anything, what's going to happen if you taste any success? Not great success, just a little bit of success. Get that first real good endorsement deal. Get that real good check, that first real good check besides your playing money. How are you going to react to that? From what I've seen, I mean, maybe it's a show. I hope it is, but it gives me pause. So there's the major intrigue I see with the number 2 pick. Um, Dang, we got to move through fast. I've been talking too much. No, obviously, I'm here to talk. So that's the intrigue I see at the top of the draft. Victor going one, Scoot Miller. Going to be interesting there. Who goes two or three? But outside of that, it's really kind of a guessing game after them. I mean, you got some nice things with the Twins that are coming out. Um, again, if you're a Nuggets fan, make sure you're tuning in because it's not like it was before where they only had one second round pick. They now got one first and two twos. So you saw what they did with those late round picks last year with Christian Brown and Peyton Watson. I see Denver being able to sneak somebody in like that too, like a Derek Whitehead maybe from Duke. Um, it's going to be a very interesting draft. I think it's going to be a lot of trades. I don't see um, Portland or Charlotte both staying at where they're at. I believe one of them is going to trade their pick and move back. Um, Regardless of where of who it is that moves up, I just see that happening. I think two or three is going to be traded. There's going to be at least three trades in the top 10. And we could see a record number of trades in the first round after the movement that's already happened before the draft. I can only imagine how crazy this is going to get. So if y'all are into a absolute draft frenzy, make sure y'all tune in here in about 25 minutes to be exact when the draft starts. So, and again, we will be right here doing NBA draft live coverage. So let's not go any further than that. We're going to do plenty of talking about the NBA draft here coming up in a few, about 20 minutes or so. So let's go ahead and talk about the NFL. One of the bigger stories that's been happening over about this time of year over the last couple of years, where obviously the off-season wheel that is the NFL kind of slows down about this time in between mini camps and training camp. So things kind of die out. Usually at this time of the year, the only news you hear is bad news. But the thing that's starting to catch people's attention is that unlike when it first came out, we're talking about Hard Knocks from HBO, where it seemed like every team wanted a chance at having HBO's cameras come through their facility, it's getting nigh impossible to find a team that wants HBO. For the last several seasons, the NFL has essentially forced a different team to take up the mantle of being on Hard Knocks. And really, I think where teams not wanting this in their building stemmed from the 2018 Cleveland Browns. Um, that was the circus of. I mean, it was great TV. HBO probably was their best season of Hard Knocks when it comes to drama and intrigue. When you had Freddie Kitchens and his OC sitting there and passively aggressively, essentially undermining each other throughout the entire training camp. The ire that was there, the ridiculousness that was the Cleveland Browns in that season, that really kind of laid bare. Like, I know all of us really want to believe that the NFL is a true meritocracy and that any player from any walk of life could somehow will their way onto a roster. The reality of the situation is outside of maybe maybe one or two positions, backup quarterback, stuff like that, most position battles are absolutely farcical. There is very rarely that a team has a true position battle. They might say they have a position battle, but that's just for the cameras. It's just for people to feel good that, hey, maybe if I work hard or my son works really hard and they just try really hard, they can be an NFL player too. And that's what they want you to believe because it feeds into the nostalgia and the love of the game and all those other things. But the reality of the situation is the organization almost always has a preference. They might not say it out loud, but they almost always have a preference. Like, one of the most recent examples I can give is the Drew Lock Teddy Bridgewater QB battle. Vic Fangio and company already had it in their heads. They were going to give the job to Teddy Bridgewater. They had decided what Drew Lock was. And even though Drew Lock outplayed Teddy, and I will debate anybody on that in any way, he outplayed Teddy as a quarterback and as an athlete. But because Vic Fangio and company wanted Teddy Bridgewater, and it was kind of close. Teddy had a pretty decent preseason that year, but Drew Lock looked markedly improved. So instead of giving the young gunslinger a chance at possibly improving, and the offense actually was much better against good teams with Drew Lock, aka Kansas City, etc., than they were with Teddy Bridgewater. If you go and you look at the numbers against the better teams, Baltimore, Kansas City, etc., and and then you take Teddy and Drew and put them side by side, Drew is here, Teddy's here. But even despite all of those things, they never really gave Drew a chance because, again, it is not a true meritocracy. They want you to believe that. But I'm going to give you the reality of the situation that doesn't work that way. The coaches have a player, they might lie and tell him that he's in a battle because they want to push him. Because just like with any other human, if you tell a human that they're good and they don't have to try any harder, typically they don't. Yes, obviously, again, exceptions to every rule. But typically, the average human, if you tell them, oh, you're good, no reason to try any harder, they won't. They will become complacent. So a lot of coaches and really good coaches have a way of manufacturing competition. They're not going to actually give the job to that undrafted free agent unless, again, either A, an injury, or B, performance. Those are the only ways that the undrafted free agent jumps over the first rounder. It has nothing to do with being a true meritocracy. It's because that first rounder refused to do the bare minimum and just keep his job. That they just hand it to the other guy. It's not so much because of what that guy did, it's what the other guy didn't do. So, with that being the case, you have this facade that the NFL has tried to put out in front of us. When Hard Knocks comes in, that facade is torn down. And you see the reality of the situation. You see the ugliness. You see the undrafted free agent get treated like the undrafted free agent actually does. And that was like a couple years ago with the Jets, where the undrafted free agent that they had been following around, he was cut, not told that he was cut, until he got to the facility, tried to get in, and they changed his code. They took away his security code. That's how he found out he was cut. They didn't even care to call him in the morning and say, hey, guy, don't show up at 6 a.m. today because you don't work here anymore. No, they let the man get up at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, go through his normal routine, get all his stuff together, drive all the way to the facility in New Jersey. It's not like it's like Green Bay where you're driving through a housing suburb or something like that to get to work. This is in New Jersey, maybe going through turnpikes and that terrible traffic that they're notorious for in New Jersey and New York. That is the reality of the NFL. It's not the glitz and the glamour. It is dirty, it is grimy, and it is above all else a business. And these teams have been seeing their images, even if they weren't the greatest to begin with, like say the Raiders or the Browns, getting even more destroyed by the media cycle, by social media, etc. Because HBO lied or misrepresented things, it's because they showed the ugly truth. And so, yet again, here we are at the end of June, and not a single team outside of the Commanders, which is hilarious. You can't find it. This is how bad the situation is in Washington with the Commanders, is they have been screaming at the top of their lungs that they will take Hard Knocks, but the NFL refuses to let them, even though no other team wants it. No other team has come out and said, or even sent an email to Roger Goodell or a handwritten note or anything that they want this. And the Commanders are literally just hands up everywhere. We want it, and they refuse to allow it. So what I want to hear from you all, what do you believe? Who do you believe deserves to have hard knocks forced on them, and who and or if it's different, who do you believe will be forced into it? To me, I think one of the better places that I think could be the most entertaining, not simply because they're going to get a bunch of drama in that, is New England. And I say that because Bill is in the throes of a rebuild. This is the first time since he's been in New England where things are in limbo. He doesn't know if he's got his franchise quarterback. He doesn't know if this roster is good enough to win and get into the playoffs, let alone get back to his standard of championships. So to see how this offseason is handled after that debacle of an offseason last year where he had like 2 offensive coordinators and 3 defensive coordinators and just the absolute cluster of a whatever that was going. I want to see the behind the scenes. That is something I would want to see. But with Robert Kraft having his nails dug so far into Roger Goodell's hiney, I don't see that happening. So where do I believe that they will end up? Where will they be forced? I would not be shocked to see them in Miami. I think they're they're going to want to repair some of that imaging that's happened with Stephen Ross and the Flores lawsuits and all of those debacles that have happened over the last 24 months. I could really see them forcing Miami to go into that, take it on, and do their best to rehabilitate their image. You'll probably see a bunch of little pieces here and there about what Stephen Ross has done in the black community and things like that. If I'm right, that is what you're going to see. It would be terrible. I would hate to see that. Again, I want to see it in New England. I want to see Bill Belichick and what he would do to avoid those cameras at almost all costs as much as possible, and then how he would react and act on camera in the times he would be forced to be on camera. I think that would be just ratings gold. I think anybody and everybody could truly or enjoy that. So those are my thoughts. That's my picks for Hard Knocks. Who do you believe is going to see, or who do you want to see? What team would you love to see? And go again, write down in the comments, either YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, wherever it is you like. Let us know. We would love to have that conversation with you. Let's go ahead and get to the last topic of conversation today before I let you go, and then jump back for some NBA draft prime or draft live coverage. Blah 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 blah. I'll get words together. They're hard, but I'll figure it out. But last topic I want to talk about is the top 5 overlooked teams of the 2023 NFL season. The parameters by which I have this list of 5 teams is teams that are either not being talked about at all or being talked about in a terrible way that is undeserving. So these are not in any particular order. I'm not saying that the 5th is the most overlooked team or the least overlooked team, and vice versa with the number 1. These are just a list of 5 in no particular order because I believe all 5 of them are being overlooked in one way or another that's equal. So first up is one that's a team that has a coach I have nothing but the utmost respect for, and that is the Pittsburgh Steelers and Mike Tomlin. I've said this on multiple occasions. As long as you have Mike Tomlin at the head of your football team, you're going to win games and you're going to have a winning record. That's just what he does. The Steelers at this point have finished 500 or better for 19 straight seasons. 16 of those seasons have been with Mike Tomlin. It's insane to think that that man has been there that long. Like, I remember when he got hired. I remember that day. And to think that he has been there and been so consistently good, no matter who it is that's on that field. I mean, the winning record a couple years ago when he had quarterbacks like Mitch Trubisky and I can't even remember Mr. Racial Slur that got his head dented in by Myles Garrett. I forget, Mason Rudolph, I think it was. Yeah, that's it, Mason Rudolph. But yeah, and still pulled out a winning record last year with a rookie quarterback, Kenny Pickett, that I do believe was one of the better prospects in that draft of a very, 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 very terrible quarterback class. Um, Still, he worked wonders with that kid. I believe, yeah, Kenny Pickett, there it is. He had a 90.1 PFF grade from weeks 12 through the end of the season. They could definitely surprise some people if that he doesn't Kenny can't Kenny Pickett is not going to sustain that level of play. He's just not. The way I describe Kenny Pickett is a slightly more athletic version of Andy Dalton. That's the ceiling of a Kenny Pickett. I like the kid, and I had a friend he used to be a friend that was a Pittsburgh Steelers fan that absolutely lost it when I said that. Like, I called him the second coming of Blaine Gabbert or something. Like, the Red Rifle was legit for a few years. Like, he's not going to win you a Super Bowl, but he'll get you to the playoffs. He might win you a playoff game or two, even though Andy Dalton never has. But hey, I said he's a slightly better version. So I think he'll get you a playoff win or two. And with Mike Tomlin, I can't count that out. But Kenny Pickett is not winning you any championships. But you can win games with him. And that's what Pittsburgh will do this season. And I think they even improve on that barely above 500 record last year where they went 9-7. I think they probably actually win like 10 or 11 games and sneak into the playoffs. The next one up is a team that everybody's counting out because they traded their almost 40 quarterback. Still insane to me to people, man, 40 years old and still playing quarterback in the league. That's insane. But shipping him out and getting a younger guy, that's almost the holy grail of the NFL, is to ship off your old quarterback with a new quarterback that's been developed in your system, sliding right in behind him. And the Packers have now done it twice in a row, from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers, from Aaron Rodgers, and now we'll see if Jordan Love can continue that legacy of the Packers just being ahead of the curve. Everybody lost their minds when they traded up to get Jordan Love a few years ago, and now look at them. They've had a guy that's been able to sit there and learn the system that he's in and build on one good preseason after the next until now he's being handed the reins, and they drafted him a first round wide receiver. They obviously seem to like him a lot more than the last guy that was crying and screaming for years for them to draft him a first round wide receiver, only to see them do it right after they ship him out. That honestly was a bit of poetic justice. But I think people are overlooking the fact that the Packers were not a one-man band. This is not the Patriots with Tom Brady and a bunch of guys. The Packers are pretty loaded. Like, I mean, outside of maybe their safety tandem not being the best, they're still serviceable. And the other side of the field, opposite of Jair Jackson, is a bit of a question mark. But outside of that, they're solid across the board. Solid offensive line, solid defensive line, solid pass rushers, solid linebackers, solid running game, above solid running game with Aaron Jones. You know, decent tight ends with Robert Tonyan. Wide receivers are starting to look pretty good. I think that this team is being well overlooked. I'm not going to sit here and say that Jordan Love is going to go out there and win an MVP and make people forget about Aaron Rodgers and all the great things he did in Green Bay, but I do believe he's going to be better than people think. He's going to be much more comfortable than people think because he's been in this offense. He knows this offense front to back there. Now, if he doesn't, then we got a problem and people should panic. But from all accounts and purposes, that he knows the offense, he understands the offense, he's good with the audibles, etc., of just being a good quarterback. I think with the talent he has around him, the coaching of Mike LaFleur and his staff are going to be able to raise his boat along with everybody else's. And this team could be a playoff contender even this season. A lot of people have them knocked off and saying that, oh, they're just going to win 2 or 3 games and then be in the running for the number 1 pick next year to completely rebuild, get their new quarterback, yada, yada, yada. I don't think it's going to be that case. I see this team picking at no higher than 14, 15 in the next draft, which means a possible winning record, if not sneaking into the playoffs and getting them down into the 20s. That's my take on Green Bay. Next up is the Los Angeles Rams. This hinges entirely on Matthew Stafford, obviously. When he was healthy, he won him a Super Bowl. When he wasn't, they became terrible. Even though every other thing stayed the same. Once Matthew Stafford disappeared, that team fell off a cliff, which shows you the absolute importance of just competent QB play. You saw it with Baker Mayfield getting that roster on Christmas 3 days after riding on the plane or arriving on a plane, and dropped a 50 burger on what so many people were talking about Denver defense being one of the greatest of all time. This team can be legit and be not only a playoff contender, but a team that could possibly make some noise in the playoffs if their stars, Matthew Stafford, Cooper Kupp, Aaron Donald, etc., stay healthy. Because just like I was talking about earlier with Mike Tomlin, I am a firm believer in Sean McVay. He might not be absolutely on the level of a Mike Tomlin, but he is still a great offensive mind that can build a game plan that can make almost any defense look silly. So you add in all of those things. Again, health is a huge, huge piece of that pie. But if they can get that down, this team could make some noise in a weak NFC. I think the AFC is still the conference of champions. I don't see the NFC really having a team that can knock off the cream of the crop of the AFC right now. The quarterback game in the AFC is insane. And again, that's the most important part. And as long as you have that, you always have the advantage. So Los Angeles making noise in a weak NFC, completely viable. Again, hinging on the health of that right elbow of Matthew Stafford. So next up, New Orleans Saints. The Saints are actually the NFC South favorites, but this is also the weakest, if not one of the weakest, if not the weakest division in football. And they did go out and get Derek Carr, which I think is what a lot of people are overlooking, is that Derek Carr has spent the last several years carving up Denver defenses, Los Angeles defenses that every pundit was talking about being so great, so amazing, so dominant. And he just goes out there and has 300-yard game after 300-yard game after 300-yard game. There was a point last season that not last season, the season before, that with Rich Bisaccia, he was averaging the most yards per game all the way up until week 12. He was averaging over 315 yards a game at that point. Then the offseason came, McDaniels came, and the wheels fell off of the car. Pardon the pun. I am a dad. But I don't subscribe to the fact that Derek Carr is a terrible quarterback. I also don't subscribe to the fact that Derek Carr is a Super Bowl winning quarterback. Again, a lot in the ilk of an Andy Dalton, Kenny Pickett, etc. He is a guy that's going to win games if you get the right pieces around him. He's going to have really big games. He's going to have 300, 400-yard games. His wide receivers are going to eat. His running backs are going to eat. He can get the ball out quickly so his offensive line doesn't get hung out to dry. And with guys like Chris Olave and the other weapons that he had, Alvin Kamara, and that he has down there in New Orleans, I think it's even better than what he had ever at Las Vegas, outside of the one season he had with Devontae with a terrible, terrible coach and Josh McDaniels, where it didn't work out as well as you would like. I think that he's going to surprise some people. I do think New Orleans goes out and wins the division. I don't think they're going to make any noise in the playoffs, though, despite the fact that they got a great defense. I mean, Cam Jordan and those guys, they play a great brand of football, great brand of defense. I just don't think it's going to be enough to overcome when you have a Derek Carr going up against any of the elite quarterbacks in the playoffs on either side. If he's going up against a Jalen Hurts and the Eagles, I'm going to take them all day, because that Eagles defense is going to harass Derek, and that's the way that you beat Derek. You harass him, you get him off his spots, and you force him into bad throws. He throws interceptions whenever he's under pressure and beat down in a game. He tends to end up just floating some balls out there, and you can take advantage of it. Eagles, they're capable of it, and they got a great quarterback on their side that can make the plays that he needs to make to capitalize on those mistakes Derek Carr makes. But again, I don't think that they're going to be nearly as bad as people think they will be, and they're going to surprise some folks. And the last but not least, I'm sure this won't surprise anybody, but is these guys, Denver Broncos. I I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid like I did last season, where I'm going to sit here and be like, oh, they're going to win the division, they're going to sweep the Chiefs, and blah blah blah. I do believe this is a markedly improved team. I do believe they go from the 4 to 5 win range all the way up into the 10-11 range, sneak in as a wild card, and even win at least one playoff game. I believe that they are that talented, that good with the right coaching in place and the right quarterback, the right skill position players, and finally an offensive line that you can count on. Again, outside, I know I've had my reservations about the center position. I think Lloyd can turn it around if he's given the right coaching and in the right system. This might be the one for him. It might not be. But there's also other options like Luke Wattenberg and Alex Forsythe they just picked up in this past draft. So I think they'll figure it out. Um, Sean's always been great about finding offensive linemen. His coaches have always been great about developing them. So I give all the trust to Peyton and what they've done this offseason. I do believe people are disrespecting the Broncos in a way that they are going to regret, especially what they did last year and the egg that they're going to have to wear on their face. I hope a lot of people enjoy eating humble pie. I will make this bold prediction right here. This is the season the streak against the Chiefs and the Raiders ends. I'm not going to sit here and say that they're going to sweep either one of those teams, but they are going to get one. They are at least going to get one, and there is no way that Broncos country will ever forgive any front office if they allow the Raiders, and not just the Raiders, but the Raiders with Josh McDaniels at the helm, to sweep this team 2 years in a row. That is absolutely unacceptable. So, Coach Peyton, we're trusting you. We're believing in you. Bring us just a win against the Chiefs and Raiders. That's a great place for us to start. You get us a win against the Chiefs and Raiders, you're locked in for the rest of your contract, and we can move forward from there. So get us those. We'll be happy to have them here in Denver. And I believe this is a great place for us to end. So, as always, we're at E5280 Sports and Lifestyle. Sorry, just got distracted by what sounded like a crash out there. I think they're okay, though. But let's get to the ending here. All right. E5280 Sports and Lifestyle. Thank you again for this platform. We appreciate it here at the Answers 42 podcast. I am your host, Dan Wettstein. And as always, don't question the blue.